This is the second of three clashes between the mighty three there in the Big Ten Eastern Division. So Penn State falls in Columbus. They get their next go at it against a Michigan team. And I guess we should feel better about Penn State's chances considering what they did at Maryland, although the Terps not as good as we thought they were. Your interpretation of 51-15 and what that meant.
To me, the biggest positive is I get what you're saying. Like, obviously, Maryland is Maryland. No knock on them. They're not as good as a lot of people, myself included, thought they were going to be earlier in the year. But the biggest positive was for the first time really all year, you saw them with some consistency trying to push the ball down the field. You saw Drew Aller not look hesitant. You saw him come out and just kind of grip it and rip it. You know, he showed off that arm talent. He showed why he was a 5-star recruit, why some places had him as number one quarterback in the country in high school. He made throws. There were multiple throws he made on a Saturday that honestly half the quarterbacks in the NFL probably can't make. So we saw it, and to see it in game action, especially on the road where he has really struggled this year, that is undoubtedly a big positive no matter what kind of spin you want to put on him with the opponent. Because I get it. It was just Maryland. And, you know, I said this after the game. I know Penn State has scored 63 points twice this year. But when you consider the opponent, consider it was on the road, that was by far the best offensive performance of the year. It was the best game Katron Allen has had running the ball. Also, we finally saw Dante Cephas, the coveted wide receiver transfer from Kent State, step up and have a huge game, made 2 really good catches in the end zone for touchdowns on 2 really good throws by Drew. He also had a great game blocking with his route running. We kind of joked, my cohorts and I at Happy Valley Insider, whenever Drew threw that interception against Indiana and then led them right down the field to score to win, like, hey, you know what? Maybe now that he's finally thrown an interception, he won't be as careful and is concerned with turnovers. And maybe there's some truth to it because ever since that interception, I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but the Maryland game combined with that last drive against Indiana, he has something like 30 for 40 for, I think, almost 300 yards, 5 scores. So there might be something too that once he threw that interception and that he felt the pressure of not having any turnovers where he can just kind of, just grip it and rip it and let the arm talent talk for itself.
Yeah. So, and it's kind of strange because that interception, if Tom Allen and Indiana would have taken better advantage of it, because I certainly didn't understand, nor did I agree with the play calling once they did. When you're in Happy Valley as a 32-point underdog, you've just picked off Drew Aller for the first time that he's thrown a pass interception in his career after setting a record. And you've got the ball in the red zone or the lip of the red zone, and you can go up by 4 with a touchdown and put Aller in a situation where he's got to drive it in the final 2 minutes for a touchdown. You got to try to score a touchdown. But anyway, that was 2 weeks ago against, and then he bounces back, obviously, even after throwing the pick, then the field goal to tie the game. He goes for the gusto down the right sideline and throws a nice ball to win the game. That my point about the interception was going to be, well, if it's a first quarter interception and he gets it out of the way in that manner, I would believe, that could be shrugged off. But I guess regardless, he bounced back with a nice effort, no question, against Maryland. When you bring up Katron Allen, and I'll throw Nick Singleton into the mix, has Allen taken over as not the number one back, but more of a primary role?
I think so. Allen this year is averaging nearly 5 yards per carry. Last week against Maryland, averaged almost 7 yards per carry, finished with like 92, 93 yards, which had he gotten there would have been the first 100-yard game of the season for a Penn State back. Singleton still leads the team in touchdowns, but only averaging 4 yards per carry. Now, Singleton has been more of a threat catching the ball out of the backfield this year than Allen. But the explosiveness, which is what Nicholas Singleton is known for, hasn't been there. Now, I will say each of the last 2 weeks, he's returned to kickoff 50-plus yards. Singleton has, so maybe something is starting to click there again. But there's just been multiple times this year where there's been holes that last year Singleton hits that and bursts through it for 10, 20, 30 yards, if not more. And this year he's getting shoestring tackled. Something just seems off with him. I don't know what it is. But hopefully whatever it is, they get it addressed, if not sooner, at least during this offseason. But I definitely think the offense moves better right now with Katron Allen on the field. And you look ahead to Saturday's game, if you're going to pull the upset, it's a game where you need to maximize every opportunity in offense. You need to maximize your possessions, maximize your yardage. And I feel like Katron Allen gives you a better chance of that right now than Nicholas Singleton does. So I suspect we'll still see plenty of both on Saturday, but I would expect Allen to get more reps than Singleton, especially if this is a game where, you can get into the fourth quarter and Penn State's, within a score or tied or leading. I think you really lean on Allen in to try and, help drain the clock and put it away.
Our guy in the chat, David, says that Penn State never beats anyone ranked in the top 25. So I did this count a couple weeks ago. That would be 13 games that James Franklin has won against top 25 opponents. So 13-0, that's a pretty close estimation there, David. Nice job. So, it's obviously a storyline that they don't beat the very best teams on the schedule and have had issues with that. But, yes, ranked teams, yes, they've done rather fine. And if you look at the bowl record, all ranked teams, usually in the top 10, those have been pretty good showings for Penn State. Good bowl record, Rose Bowls, BCS Bowls, New Year's Six Bowls, the whole deal. Marty, when we look at this defense, and I'm going to let you know, I saw almost every play of the Indiana game. I did not touch the Maryland game. I watched like the 8-minute highlight deal. They didn't really get shredded against Indiana in a sense from play to play, but it was those big shots that really hurt them and kept the Hoosiers in the game. What was going on there with an airtight Penn State defense that was giving up those kind of bombs?
It was mostly two plays. Indiana got 159 yards on two plays. On one, it was a miscommunication between Johnny Dixon and KJ Winston. One of them was supposed to blitz. One of them was supposed to go into coverage. They both blitzed, left a wide receiver wide open. Jalen Reed noticed it, but by the time Reed noticed it, he didn't have the angle to get there to make up for it. And then the other one was Zakee Wheatley bit on a pump fake, and then two or three guys missed tackles. So I don't think it was anything super concerning. Outside of those two plays, Indiana had like 170 yards of offense. Now, obviously, you can't take those plays away, and you're lucky it was Indiana, a team who can't get out of their own way and couldn't really take advantage of your two defensive mishaps there. But even in the Indiana game, when the defense had to come through, they did. When Indiana picked off Drew Allar, the defense held them to a field goal. When Penn State took the lead back, literally the very next play, there's a strip sack that results in a safety that effectively ended the game. So it was mostly just two really bad plays, one of which was a miscommunication. The other one saw a young defensive back bite on a pump fake combined with some poor tackling. So nothing super alarming to me. Against Maryland, a lot of people want to point out Talia Tagovailoa starting 17 of 17, but it's because Maryland was just content running 4 or 5 yard patterns and Penn State was tackling them right there. So Penn State was content giving them those because half the time on third down, they would wind up getting a sack or a TFL and Maryland start the punt anyway. So the defense played extremely well. The mishaps against Indiana, I think, were just two fluky things and nothing that really raised a red flag to me.
I like strange, weird, odd stats. And Maryland rushing for a -49, I think was the number.
-49 is what it finished at.
-49. And if you know the way stats are compiled, folks, of course, they include sacks. But they basically didn't even try to run the ball. Like that was like a ton of sack yardage.
Yeah, I was going to say, even without the sack yardage, just like regular running, they still had negative yards rushing, even if you took out sack yardage.
Yeah. Roman Hemby ran for 1,000 yards last year. He was like 5 carries for 0.
Yeah.
And the best figure in the Big Ten this century in terms of rush defense, -49 against Maryland. We got Marty Leap here from Penn State Rivals. I want to keep Marty along here for the ride. I don't know how much time you have, just long enough. We've got Tanner Wooten from Blue by 90. I wanted to hear you guys mix it up a little bit and go back and forth on the Michigan game. It's been noted here in the chat, and we did a Michigan live stream this morning, and a lot of people upset about the noon kickoff So obviously there's not the impact from the crowd, from the setting, from all of that there is. I would be one to say, if I didn't hear the feedback, I would say, what's the difference? But we know that there's a difference because there are enough people that talk about it, whether they be coaches and players or fans themselves, to say there's a difference. So, but it is what it is, and Fox owns the Big Ten, and they put the biggest games at noon. So this has been going on for 5 years, folks. Like, I hear people talk about it like this is a new thing, like what's going on. This game's at noon. Yeah, this has been going on with the Big Ten and Fox since like 2017. So this is a 7th season of this. But just your thoughts about starting at noon and what kind of home field advantage can be summoned up at that point.
Yeah, that's where I dislike it is, as a Penn State fan, everyone has seen the whiteout. Everyone has seen night games here. They know what it's like. You would much rather be able to get in Michigan, Ohio State last year at night with that crowd, with the whiteout. That said, I mean, the noon kickoffs at Penn State have still been some really good crowds. I mean, last year they took Ohio State to the wire until JTT took that game over in the closing minutes in a big noon kickoff, and the crowd was raucous for that. I expected, I mean, the crowd Saturday was going to be lit regardless, but just with everything else going on right now, this is the first time Michigan's played on the road since all of this has started and happened. I think that place is going to be one of the best atmospheres you've seen at Beaver Stadium in quite a while, even with the noon kick. Now, personally, for just a fan standpoint, I like it because usually the noon window, this is the only like good game is big noon kickoff. So when Penn State plays in big noon kickoff, I like it because then I know usually in the 3:30 or the 7:30 window when the games are better, I don't have to be sitting there like, oh man, there's 3 games I want to watch, but Penn State's on right now. Like last week, for example, that 3:30 window had quite a few games I was super interested in, but Penn State and Maryland were also playing in the 3:30 window. So from that standpoint, I like it because it's nice to kind of have your team as that standalone one good game of the window where you're not concerned with trying to watch other games quite as much. But I will say from a home field advantage standpoint, I definitely think the night game, I mean, you can ask Jim Harbaugh. He's never won. He's coached twice at Penn State in night games, and I think the final score combined in those games was something like 72-28. Like they haven't – Penn State has come out and taken it to Michigan when they've gotten them under the lights. I mean, you can go back to Bill O'Brien, that triple overtime win in the whiteout. It makes a difference. It really does. I think Penn State now – after beating Iowa this year has won something like 7 of the last 9 primetime whiteouts. It does make a big difference, but I still think I expect that crowd to be very loud, very raucous on Saturday, and for it to be a great home field advantage.
Marty, what do you make of this Michigan scandal? And I don't know how closely you're following it, but even from the standpoint of how much do you think can be gained or is gained? And that doesn't, in my mind, excuse cheating. If it's that much, it's that much. But just in regards to what impact this is having on the other teams and Penn State. I don't know if James Franklin, I'm sure he's been asked about it. I don't know how much he's really responded in truth about his personal feelings about it. But your thoughts.
Yeah, well, James was asked about it today's press conference. He gave the answer you would expect. Oh, hey, we're not going to worry about that. We're not going to talk about that. We're focused on our game plan, yada, yada, what you would expect. But to me, it's a complex thing because sign stealing happens. There's no doubt about it. It doesn't matter I coach Pony League baseball, and if we have a chance to try and steal the other team's signs, we're going to do it. It gives you an advantage. But to this extent, I think that's where it becomes that gray area. That's where it becomes what's causing where you see so many Big Ten coaches angry is to go to the extents that they did. And I definitely, to me, you can't deny it gave them an advantage. If you look last year, some of the clips and things that have been released where you can see Stallions on the sideline very clearly mouthing, hey, run right, run left, whatever it is, to Jesse Minter, and then the defense just absolutely stuffs the play. That's an advantage. I remember when this first broke 2 weeks ago, James Franklin made a comment. This is the only really comment he's made on it, where in the 2021 game where Penn State had the ball with like 40 seconds left, down by 4 and a 4th and 1. And Penn State ran a play action and Michigan covered it beautifully. And I remember Franklin saying, like, he and Mike Yursich were just amazed that on 4th and 1 in that situation, Michigan knew to run the coverage that they did and not sell out to stop. That's why they called the pass plays. They figured Michigan would be selling out to stop the run. So just little things like that where the advantage clearly is there. You know, you look at the Fiesta Bowl last year where, truth or not, it seems to be enough smoke that TCU was tipped that this may have been going on and changed their signs, and look how that game went. You know, so I definitely think it gave them a big advantage. I will say, if it is to the extent that it seems, I think that Jim Harbaugh's days in Michigan are probably numbered. Even coming into the year, I thought after all the recruiting stuff and the burger incident, which to me, that was stupid on the NCAA's part. Like, if you want to buy a kid a dinner on a recruiting visit, you should be allowed to. I thought after all of that, Harbaugh was not going to be at Michigan next year anyway. But I definitely think now I don't expect him back. And, you know, if something happens between now and kickoff on Saturday where Jim Harbaugh isn't coaching on Saturday, it's not going to stun me either, because I do think the Big Ten would love to step in and, if nothing else, suspend Harbaugh, which I think would be the right move. I don't think, you know, they would be in the wrong for doing that. It's not going to surprise me. But yeah, I think, like I said, stealing signs happens in sports. It's unavoidable, but to do it to the extent Michigan did, that's where it becomes a problem, in my opinion. Just I mean, it's right in the bylaws. You can't do the in-person scouting ahead of time. That is illegal, and it's pretty clear that was going on to some extent. But yeah, it's definitely a sticky situation, and you know, it's made even harder by the fact it's a team that has won the Big Ten 2 years in a row, gone to the college football playoff 2 years in a row, and is in position to do the same. Because I think you'd agree with me, if this wasn't one of those 3 teams currently ranked in the top 10, the Big Ten probably would have hammered them by now. But TV and money and viewership, when your 3 cash cows are what they are, when those 3 screw up, it doesn't matter what conference you are. If your cash cows do something, you're going to give them more leeway. And I think we're like, if this was like Wisconsin or something, I think they would have been hammered already by the Big Ten, but that's kind of beside the point.
When I look at Penn State, I look at the running backs, and those 2 are as dynamic as you're going to see in the Big Ten. I think that defense is lights out. That's going to be Michigan's toughest test, maybe all year, honestly. I think that defense is legit. Marty, is real quick, just going to ask you a question. Is there any news surrounding Chop Robinson's availability this weekend? Because that's a pretty big deal, you know, for both sides of this game.
Yeah, it's definitely a big deal. James Franklin told the media today he is hopeful that Chop will play on Saturday. He did not play against Maryland, but he traveled with the team. He was fully dressed and fully participating in pregame warmups. So I think all of that's pretty telling. The fact he did all of that, and then coming out of it, they're hopeful he's going to play. I would assume we see him, and I mean, it might be limited with snaps. It might not be the 60, 65 snaps a game he typically plays. But I would assume we see Chop in some fashion. And, you know, that's a really good defensive end room, even without Chop Robinson. So it's crazy because he might be the best player on their defense, but it's still one that they've been able to survive without. Now, you're going to beat Michigan, you're going to need Chop. But I would expect – I don't know if he'll be 100%. I don't know how many snaps he'll have. It might be on a pitch count, but I would expect we see him in some fashion.
You know, I noticed there was some pressure. I think Purdue's defensive ends are pretty good, and they were able to generate some pressure. And I think you saw McCarthy have a little bit of happy feet on Saturday. Even then, though, a lot of us in the Michigan sphere were like, "What's going on with 9?" And you know, he still is 65%, 335 yards, 9 yards an attempt. Like, his off game is still pretty damn good, which, you know, I've seen a lot of Michigan quarterbacks, so it's kind of nice to have that be the guy under center for Michigan, but. Yeah, I think from the Michigan end, there's a lot of things that I love about this team, but I think I'm a little bit concerned about the run game going up against Penn State right now. They're not really firing on all cylinders. So, Marty, I'd love to know what you hear about that. My one thing with that, though, is similar to last year coming into the Penn State game, Michigan played at Indiana. Really wasn't able to get the run game going. It was a lot of McCarthy's arm, and the reads were shut off for McCarthy. He's not really running, got to keep him healthy. And then for Penn State, they had some designed runs for him that really opened some things up and were kind of, key catalysts on those 2 long touchdowns that Corum and Edwards had to start the second half last year. So, Marty, I'd love to know what you think about, Penn State defense coming in against this Michigan offense, maybe a little bit more balanced than they've been in the past, more of a dynamic playmaker at quarterback who's a year older now. But the run game is maybe not as explosive as it was in 2022.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think, as I'm sure this has come as no surprise to anybody, Manny Diaz is a very prideful individual. Manny Diaz is probably a top 5 defense coordinator in the country. I've got no doubt Manny and this crew is going to be ready to go for Saturday after what happened last year in Ann Arbor. They are going to be out to prove a point. The rush defense has been questioned since that game, and it's kind of built up to this because everyone in Penn State Circle said, well, yeah, the rush defense has been great since then, but it doesn't matter if you can't stop Michigan. And I think they're built for success. I really do. If you go back and rewatch that game last year, Penn State was incredibly not gap sound. And that was as big a problem as anything. That happened this year in the season opener against West Virginia. Now, to West Virginia's credit, other than Michigan, that's the best offensive line Penn State has played all year and will play. West Virginia's offensive line is really good. But since then, this defense has been stellar against the run. You know, Mark and I talked about it before you joined us. Maryland had negative 49 yards rushing last week. Now, a lot of that was sack yards, but if you take out sack yardage, Maryland still rushed for negative yards. They held Iowa to something like 1.1 yards per carry. Ohio State, I think, only averaged like 3.2 yards per carry against them. They have been extremely good against the run. I think they're going to be extremely motivated on Saturday. I think you're going to see them play a much more gap sound style of defense. And I really do think that if Michigan is going to win this game, I mean, make no buts about it. If I was making a prediction today, I would predict Michigan. Now, obviously, with everything going on, who knows? I've said that this is a game you probably safely can't predict till Saturday morning because just you don't know what's going to happen with the Big Ten and the coaching staffs and that sort of thing. But I think if Michigan's going to do it, it's going to be on McCarthy because I do think Penn State's going to do a good job of handling the running game. I mean, you would know better than me, but it does seem from what I've read, what I've seen of Michigan this year, this offensive line, it's not bad, but it's not as good as it's been. And Penn State's defensive line might be the best in the Big Ten. So I think that's a combination where Michigan's going to get their runs. Corum is so good. Edwards is so good. But I don't think it's going to be a repeat of last year where they're just running wild either. So I do think McCarthy is going to have to make some plays. And, you know, go back 2 years ago, that game in Happy Valley, what did it come down to? It came down to Cade McNamara making some big throws late in the fourth quarter for Iowa or for Michigan, to pull it out. And I think it might be similar to that where McCarthy's going to have to make some plays because I do think this Penn State defense, you mentioned it being balanced. It is very balanced. The pass rush is tremendous. The run defense has been great. The secondary has been really good. And I think most of all, they embody Manny Diaz. Manny is aggressive. He's fiery. He trusts his system. He believes in it. And so do these guys on defense. If they give up a big play, they don't worry about it because in their minds, hey, we're getting a TFL. We're getting a sack. We're going to force turnover. So it doesn't matter. And I think that, like I said, they're going to be very motivated on Saturday after what happened last year.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing when I look at Michigan's performance in the run game, though, because if you go and look at, you know, I would say the three toughest defenses, you know, against the run that they have played in 2023 so far have been Nebraska, Rutgers, and Minnesota. And it felt like they got whatever they wanted in those games. And now against Indiana, Michigan State, and Purdue, it just felt like we're not going to put McCarthy at risk. Now, he will still scramble because he is that kind of guy. You know, every time I watch Michigan on TV, they talk about being a hockey player and the competitive nature and just not being afraid of contact, which I get a little nervous sometimes, right? You know, that depth is not there. There's no Cade McNamara behind you, right? But I do think that his legs are going to be incorporated into the offense. I think that will probably open some things up a little bit, you know, cause some hesitancy from the linebackers. But, you know, I think it's going to come down to, like you said, J.J. McCarthy. And then on the other side, Drew Allar, you know, I try to be fair, and I haven't seen a ton from him this year so far that's lived up to the hype, right? 5-star, top 10 player coming in 2022. You know, the yards per attempt have not been great, but he has bounced back really well, you know, against Indiana and Maryland. You know, it just seems like they don't let him just, you know, let it rip. I mean, they had the long touchdown to win the Indiana game. It's like, man, you got to let this kid just go out there and rip it, make mistakes, learn from it. Like, I don't think as a first-time starter having, you know, 20 touchdowns, 1 pick, it's great. But I if I'm a Penn State guy, I'd like to see him make more mistakes and learn from them so you get to this part of the season and you don't have so many question marks. So I'd love to know what you think because I feel like they need to take the training wheels off, man. Let this 5-star go be a 5-star. You have to just do that sometimes and take the lumps.
Hey, you're preaching to the choir there. You know, I mentioned this to Mark earlier. some of my cohorts and I, rivals with Happy Valley Insider, we joked that once if he threw that interception against Indiana, like, hey, it's okay. Take a deep breath, Drew. It's going to be okay. And since that interception, he's coming off by far the best game of his career against Maryland. I mean, it was just Maryland, but man, some of the throws he made were just, I said it to Mark, there was 3 or 4 throws he made in that game. Half the quarterbacks in the NFL aren't going to make that throw. And that just kind of goes to your point of, hey, he's got the arm talent. Let him show it. But dating back to that last drive against Indiana, I don't have the exact stats in front of me right now, but he's something like 30 of 40 for 300 yards and 5 scores. So, like, since he threw that interception, it's almost like, hey, you know what? He realized it's going to be okay. You can make mistakes, learn from them. And even the coaching staff, the game they called against Maryland was completely different than any other game they've called this year. There were multiple deep shots. More than not, they worked. Some of the ones that weren't on Drew. Like, there was a deep post to Keandre Lambert-Smith where he just broke the wrong way coming out of his route, or else it would have been a 60-yard touchdown. There was a drop on what could have been a touchdown on a deep throw. But I'm with you. Like, take the training wheels off, let him sling it. And I will say that the fact we didn't, not just that we saw it against Maryland, but Dante Cephas, the transfer receiver from Kent State, had by far his best game of the season. You finally maybe feel comfortable. You've got 2 legitimate receiver options with Cephas and Keandre Lambert-Smith. Obviously, that opens things up a lot more too. So I do think if they're going to pull the upset on Saturday, Drew has to play the way he did against Maryland. I think if he plays the way he did against Maryland, and it's not a coincidence that he had that game and it was the best game Katron Allen's had running the ball all year either. Those 2 things definitely go hand in hand. If Drew can do that, it's going to open up the running game more, and they're going to have a chance to beat Michigan on Saturday, especially with it being in Happy Valley. And I mean, this crowd, it's always a hostile crowd for an opponent at Beaver Stadium anyway. But I mean, I'm sure you and every other Michigan person in the world agrees this is the first road game since all of this. That place is going to be, this game could be played anywhere, and that crowd was going to be so incredibly anti-Harbaugh and anti-Michigan. You throw in the fact that it's Beaver Stadium. It is a team that you have a little bit of a rivalry with to begin with already. It's going to be a very hostile crowd that I think Penn State will be able to feed off of.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be, I don't know. I mean, maybe the signs will be better. I mean, that place could be rocking no matter what, right? I mean, it's, it's not at night. It's not a true whiteout because, November Big Ten rules, night games, all that fun stuff. But I mean, I feel pretty good with McCarthy at quarterback for Michigan, just being able to go in there and say, I've been in really hostile environments. I mean, the shoe, the Horseshoe and Happy Valley are 2 of the toughest. And so, he was there as a freshman. I honestly can't remember how many times he got in with the packages they had built for him. That was a McNamara game, but so I think that he'll be ready for it. And this team, I think they're going to feed off of it too. I mean, I think it goes both ways. So I'm excited for it. With Blue by 90, we're doing a watch party in Ann Arbor. It's going to be amazing here in Ann Arbor. I'm sure you guys are going to have a ton of fun out in Central PA as well. Like, one of the best environments in college football. So going to be an awesome game. I can't wait. And again, I'm just ready to, the soft schedule stuff for Michigan, right? It's like these games were going to be played. It's just it didn't happen in October. So we're going to find out what Michigan's made of and Penn State too, because these are 2 of the best teams in the country.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we will dive into the soft schedule. I want to respect Marty's time. I'm going to make one kind of broad observation, and if Marty needs to leave, that's great. If not, Marty, you can respond to this as well before you head out. Is that I believe Penn State's got the best defense in the Big Ten, but I think Ohio State, Michigan, and Iowa are very close. I just think that Penn State, just from a sheer athletic standpoint, with Manny Diaz as the coordinator, all 3 levels. But again, I think that those 3 other teams are really, really good as well. But Michigan is just, to me, just buttoned up everywhere. Maybe there's some special teams gaffes here and there. We heard Tanner talk about the tackle play against Purdue, but they have 2 really good ends. Penn State's just more uneven. Drew Aller's got a lot of growing up to do. J.J. McCarthy's just hit his peak. I'm concerned to a certain extent about the Penn State offensive line. They don't seem to have a guy that's going to blow the top off the defense at wide receiver. A lot of 2s and 3s that might be those guys for elite teams. Marty, how would you respond to that where Penn State's a little bit more uneven and Michigan seems to be just a complete team.
Yeah, I'd agree with everything you said. I mean, I've said it, Keandre Lambert-Smith, Dante Cephas, that group, I think they're good receivers, but they are good number twos. They don't have a true number one. Michigan, yeah, I've said all year that I think Michigan's the best team in the country. I think they're a better football team than Georgia. I think they're the most complete. Like you said, they're complete. They can beat you running the ball. They can beat you throwing the ball. They've got receivers. That defense is nasty. If this game was in Ann Arbor, I would probably pick Michigan to win by 2+ scores. But I think it being in Beaver Stadium will close that gap. Like I said, I still think Michigan will win. That is assuming, something doesn't happen between now and kickoff with Harbaugh and Sharon Moore, Jesse Minter, whatever it may be, with suspensions or something. But yeah, I agree that Michigan is a complete football team. I think Penn State's a very good team. I think Penn State's one of the 10 best teams in the country. I just think Michigan and Georgia are on a different level than the rest of the country this year. And we're going to see that on Saturday, where I think it's going to be close to the end. I wouldn't be surprised if Michigan maybe gets a late score when they similar to the Ohio State game. The defense wears down, get a late score to make it 2 scores. But I expect it to be a great football game. But yeah, it should be a lot of fun. If nothing else, it should be one of the best games of the year on the college football schedule.
Why is Michigan football different post 2020 than what it was before? What happened?
I think you look at the coordinators they hired. I know that's a leading question, Mark. There's a lot that out there that Mike McDonald was really good at stealing signs. Well, he just, casually has the number 1 defense in the NFL with the Baltimore Ravens. I think they made some changes to their philosophy. I think they got a lot of bad eggs out of the building. We actually had the opportunity to speak with a number of players. We did, I think it was 4 players that we did an in-person podcast with that will be coming soon. I don't know when we're going to be able to release that, but talking to those guys, the culture is completely different from 2019, 2020 to 2021. Also, Aiden Hutchinson, JJ McCarthy, Blake Corum, Hassan Haskins, offensive line is playing amazing, right? Like, I don't think I don't think you can point to having signs as the reason that you are physically dominating opponents on the field. If you want to look at the 2021 Ohio State game, I don't think any signs could have saved anybody in that game. I mean, Michigan's getting 2 to 3 yards of movement at the line of scrimmage. So yeah, I think you got a lot of great NFL players. Look at DJ Turner, Dax Hill, Mozzie Smith. I already mentioned Hutchinson, David Ojabo, Brad Hawkins. You got Rod Moore now. I mean, you got Chris Jenkins. Like, got good players, man. Got good players, good coaches.